my family's house was haunted when I was growing up, and it always has reminded me of the Conjuring movies. So this is really interesting. My parents, when I was in high school, I guess they started when I was in middle school, but they built a house. There was no other house on the land. Before they built this house, it was completely, everything was from scratch, and it was like my family's dream home. But literally, the day that we were moving in, we brought these boxes into the house. My sister's 4 years younger than me. She was in the home. My parents and I decided we're going to go back to our old house, get some more boxes. My sister, she can stay here by herself. And so we left, and by the time that we got back to our house with the boxes, to our new house, my sister was trying to crawl out of her window in her bedroom. She had locked herself in her bedroom. She was trying to pry the screen off of the window. And when we got in and asked her what happened, she was absolutely terrified, and she said she heard men talking in the kitchen and plates and items moving around, but there was no one else there. There weren't movers. Nobody was in the house that day. It was just my family. And that was just the very beginning. So it was almost like a typical horror film, because at first my sister and I were having these experiences, but my parents didn't necessarily believe them. Now, my parents are believers. I investigate with them all the time, but you know, it's a brand new house. No one's ever lived there. There's no horrible history. There were no bones uncovered when they were building the place. It was just a house on a piece of land. But I will remember vividly till the day I die. So my sister and I, our rooms were at the end of this hallway, like one room, hallway, open dining room, kitchen area, and then my parents' room. And this one time I was in my bed late at night, and I heard what I thought was somebody in the kitchen. This was like 11, 12 at night. And so I yelled out, I think, I can't remember exactly what I said, but something to my mom, and I heard her say, yeah, what's up? Like in my mom's voice. And I think I asked, like, can you bring me a glass of water or something like that? Something stupid. And she was like, yeah, of course. There's my mom's voice. And I'm sitting there in my bedroom, and I can hear these footsteps come all the way from the kitchen, all the way to my bedroom door. And as soon as they get to my door, it's like, first of all, nobody comes around the corner. It's just empty. And they stop. And then it sounds like my mom, I think it's my mom at this point, gets on the ground on all fours and then starts crawling around my bed really fast, like on the carpet, like ding, ding, ding. And I literally remember saying, Mom, what the are you doing? So I thought my mom was tweaking out. I have no idea what's going on. I turn the flashlight on my phone and look over on the side of the bed, and it just stops. It goes completely silent. Nobody's there. My mom's not there. My sister's not there. My dad's not there. It's just empty. And shortly after that, my sister comes out of her bedroom, which is across the hall, and says, what are you yelling about? Like, what's going on? And yeah, that was when I realized that not only was the place haunted, but it was not haunted by Casper, if you want to phrase it like that. And we had all the kind of classic hallmarks of a haunting that happened in the home. We had the TVs turn on at random times in the middle of the night, turn on to static. I've got videos on my phone of our front door opening and shutting by itself. We had fire alarms go off in the middle of the night. I've got videos of all this. There was one night, and I once again have a video of the fire alarms going off, and it's saying that the front door was open, but the door was never opened. And on top of that, the lights in my bathroom all went out. There was like 4 or 5 different bulbs in the bathroom, and I got a video of me flicking on both of the switches, and all the lights were out. So just really, really weird stuff like that. And it only got worse and worse from there, and it actually culminated in my family asking a psychic who is a family friend of ours named Donna. I did a couple videos with her. She's an absolutely amazing woman, but she was called out to our house with 2 other psychic friends of hers, and they all showed up, and they walked room to room and did a cleansing of the home. It was crazy, the stuff that they told us, but it would take up another 10-minute long video. And even after they cleansed the house, we had activity that night that my friends all witnessed. And then the next day we went out to my favorite restaurant. It was my birthday, and the psychics were there eating lunch at that restaurant, and they came up to us and said, did you guys hear this in your house at around this time last night? and we were like shocked because they described exactly what had happened. And they said, yeah, we heard that too, and that's why we're here today, because we needed to discuss this, and we don't know what this means. Essentially, it meant that they thought it meant the spirit was leaving. That didn't happen. Things got worse for a while. I could once again tell stories for days about like my dad being chased through the house by something that was so scary he got out his pistol. But yeah, we eventually moved out of the house, and I don't know what happened, but I think that it's more one of those things where it's the family that's haunted and not even necessarily the house. And I could get into that in another video, but let me know, would you like to hear more of the stories? Because I could go on for hours about just the crazy things that happened in that house. And did any of you guys have experiences like that? Because I always thought that it was creepy and crazy, but nowadays when I'm reflecting back on it, it seems more like a very negative haunting, as opposed to just like, I used to think it was just like a haunted house, but I have completely different theories on it now. And when I watch films like The Conjuring or The Haunting in Connecticut, it just gives me a very similar vibe to what happened to my family, where it just started off kind of weird, and then it got worse and worse and worse until we tried to have someone come do something about it, and it didn't end up helping. So, yeah.
You guys, one of my followers named Nick sent me a story through my Instagram DMs about the rake and how he encountered one. And y'all, keep in mind, I had no idea what the rake was prior to this. So when I looked it up, I literally screamed. All I'm gonna say is if you're in Ohio or near Ohio, watch out for this thing because apparently it's running loose over there. So Nick told me he had 2 sightings of the rake. The first sighting happened 1 year ago when him and his friends were hanging out at one of their houses. The friend of the house was named Adam, and they basically stayed there every weekend. Nick said it was a typical Saturday night, sitting around the fire pit and talking about school, sports, whatever topics came to mind. At one point, Nick remembers Adam telling everyone to grab some flashlights and that they were going to go on a walk around his backyard. Nick told me he was kind of suspicious because Adam has never wanted to do something like that before, so his gut was telling him that there might be something that Adam wanted them to see. Also keep in mind, Adam lived in the country, so he had a pretty big backyard with the wood line at the very back of it. It was fenced in all around except for the little area that you could walk through, and that little area had bushes around it that led into the woods. Nick said Adam just wanted to walk through the woods for a bit and explore the area at night, as he apparently has never done that before and would rather do it with friends that he trusts. Nick said as they were walking through the woods, chit-chatting and spotting some huge bugs flying all around them, suddenly Adam froze in his tracks, causing everyone to bump into each other. He told me he remembers Adam lifting his flashlight and shaking. At first, Nick thought he spotted a coyote because they're pretty common around there, so it must have been a family of coyotes up ahead looking at them, but Nick knew that couldn't be it because Adam has never been afraid of coyotes to the point where he's shaking looking at them. Nick told me he remembers flashing his own light at the spot, and the whole entire group stopped to see what Adam was looking at. The lights were shining on a bush that looked like a man that was hunched over. Nick remembers Adam saying, "Do y'all see that?" And everyone nodded their heads. He told me the whole entire group, including himself, was frozen. It was like they all couldn't move after they spotted this thing in the distance. Nick said in that moment he knew something was off and that danger was about to strike. He told me the hunched man then stood up and that he was pretty tall, like way taller than anyone in the group. The thing was bald, pale, extremely skinny, and had sharp fingers. Nick told me he remembers one of his friends screaming, "Oh shit," dropped his flashlight, grabbed Adam's shoulder, and they all turned around running back to the house. Thankfully, they weren't too deep into the woods, and when they arrived back at the house, Nick said that Adam explained to them how he's seen this man before, and he wanted to see if he wasn't hallucinating and if other people could see him too. Nick said that night, all of them looked up possible creatures or animals that it could have been, but with all the traits that were described, the only thing that popped up was the rake. Fast forward a few weeks ago, Nick told me he encountered the rake again, and he is surprised that he even made it out alive. Nick told me ever since that night a year ago, he has been hyper fixated on the rake and has been doing so much research on it, reading sightings, watching videos, and even reading articles. Some think it's real and some think it's fake, but Nick told me that he knows for a fact that what he saw that night with all those boys was the rake. So Nick told me curiosity got the best of him and he wanted to explore Adam's backyard again to see if the rake was still there. He ended up convincing Adam and the two of them set up a night to do it. Fast forward, the night came and it was time to explore his backyard. Nick said they geared up with flashlights, a handgun which was Adam's dad, and a steak knife from the kitchen. None of Adam's parents were home, so it was pretty easy for them to get these things. He told me it was 11:37 p.m. when the both of them decided to start their journey through the woods. On their walk, Nick said he informed Adam more about the rake and told him everything that he knew about it. And all Adam wanted to know was how to get rid of it. As they were shining their flashlights, waving it around their surroundings, that's when Nick said he spotted it. The same man or creature from before. He remembers tapping Adam, and seconds later, this creature had two beaming lights shining on it. He told me the creature was hunched over, frozen. It turned only its head towards them, and Nick said that he could see its eyes. Its eyes were white, almost reflecting off of the flashlight, and it had a blank expression. What happened next freaked them out so much that they never plan on going back to those woods ever again. He told me the creature suddenly bent down on all fours. Its long arms and long legs made it look like some sort of cricket on the ground with sharp nails. It then turned its full body towards them and started charging at them. Nick told me both him and Adam wasted no time and used the items that they had. Nick said he threw the knife, which of course missed, and Adam shot the handgun at the creature. Nick told me the bullet was able to strike its leg and stop the creature in its tracks. He said they both turned around, dropped all their stuff, and started running towards the house. As they were running, Nick said he could hear the creature behind them starting to run again. He told me the sound of leaves crunching were increasing behind them and could hear a family of owls calling above them as if they knew that they were about to receive dinner. Eventually, Nick and Adam were able to escape once again and ended up in the backyard, ran to the back door and into the house. He told me while inside, both him and Adam were silent for the rest of the night. Fast forward, in the morning, they both had to come up with an excuse for the gun missing, which they ended up letting the dad retrieve on his own. And Nick told me after that day, both him and Adam were not allowed to hang out with each other anymore. He said he's still been texting and FaceTiming Adam about the encounter, and still can't believe they saw the rake not one, but 2 times. Although it didn't catch them, Nick said it's still wandering in Adam's backyard, and he hopes it doesn't stay there. He also hopes to never encounter it again, and the only reason why that they were able to escape was because of that one bullet wound, and without it, they would have been dead.
You know, at night when you have to turn the lights off in your house and you get to that last light and you switch it off and it's completely dark and it feels like all of a sudden your house has now become the most haunted house in the world and you have to make a run all the way back to your bedroom. There might be something to that. Now, when we are doing this, right, we put ourselves in a vulnerable position. And I think anything negative, any kind of spirit that is a negative entity knows this. This is the best time to scare us. And they're trying to see if they could scare us just a little bit to gain entry and to allow them permission to come into our lives. So this is a story I heard out of Rockford, Illinois. There was this girl, and she lived in this bigger house all alone. And it started to get late. She wanted to go to bed. So she starts going through her house, turning off all the lights. She gets to the last light, which is in the living room. And when she hits it off and it goes completely dark, she gets that feeling. Well, she walks through her living room, and as she walks past her kitchen, she turns and kind of glances in, and she sees a woman, like in a white gown, just standing in the kitchen. And she's like, "Who are you? What do you want?" And the woman just starts walking towards her. So she takes off running to her bedroom. She closes her door, locks it, and she calls the police. The police show up, and she says, "Come inside, like there's a woman in my house. I'm in my bedroom, locked in there. I don't want to come out." So they go through her house, they search it, they don't find anyone. And they said, "Ma'am, are you sure you didn't just see something? Like, are you just tired and maybe it was like a hallucination?" And she goes, "No, I'm for sure there was a woman in my kitchen." So they said, "Well, we can't find anything. You probably are just tired. Why don't you just go to bed?" So they leave, and she goes back up to her bedroom. And when she lays down in bed, she kind of feels like, you know what, maybe that was just, in my head. Maybe I'm just tired and I need to get some sleep. So as she turns around to adjust herself in the bed, there is the woman standing right next to her. And she jumps up, she runs out of her house, and she said as she's in the front of her house, she can see the woman looking out of her window, staring at her.
Should we show him the older homestead?
Yeah, let's go. As you know.
No, it's not. No, it's not. Was that you?
Yeah, that's on either side.
It went to both.
Yeah.
Mulla on teillä taas yksi creepy tarina, ja tää on vähän sama kategoriaa kuin se Peeping Wife, mikä oli mun mielestä niin yksi pelottavimmista, mitä mä en ikinä kuullut. Ja sitä kuullut, niin se on täällä mun jossain videossa, niin mä kuuntelen. Mutta tämän tarinan nimi on Standing Still Husband, eli paikallaan seisova mies, aviomies. Ja kaikki alkaa siis siitä, että tämmönen nainen on kotona yksin, hänen poikansa vaan töissä, ja sitten hänen oveen koputetaan. Hän on vaan oven, ja siellä on joku ihan vieras nainen. Ja tämä nainen sanoi hänelle, että hei, mun aviomies on sun kotona, ja niin kun, saanko mä tulla hakemaan sen sieltä, saanko mä tulla etsiä sen. Sitten se talonomistaja sieltä, ei täällä ole ketään, mä oon yksin kotona, täällä ei ole ketään. Ja tämä nainen väittää, että kyllä se on siellä, että siellä se on. Ja täällä tulee niinku semmoiset ihan sika-oudot fiilikset. Se on, että no ei täällä nyt ole ketään, sulla on varmaan väärä talo, että moikka. Ja hän laittaa oven kiinni. Mutta sitten hän kumminkin niinku haluaa vähän tsekkailla, katsoa silleen ovien takaa ja suihkuverhon takaa, missä yleensä kaikki murhaajat piilee. Ja näin, ja hän ei niinku löydä ketään. Ja hän menee siihen ovelle ja sanoo, että hei, että ei täällä niinku ole ketään. Ja sitten nainen sanoi, että on, että sä et tiedä, että kun se tekee semmoista, että se menee ihmepaikkoihin piiloon, mistä sä et niinku vois löytää, tosi semmoisiin pieniin paikkoihin. Että se on niinku tarkoitus, että sä et löydä sitä. Ja sitten niinku hän hämmästyi vielä enemmän tämä nainen. Se silleen, että what? Okei. Okay. Ja sitten nainen sanoi, niinku, että mä voin tulla näyttää sulle, että missä hän on. Sitten talon omistaja tulee semmoinen niinku red flag, että älä päästä ketään sun taloon. Hän sanoi, että ei kiitos, että ehkä mä soitan poliisit. Ja sitten nainen sanoo siihen, että ei, poliisit ei tule eikä ne tee tälle asialle mitään, että mä voin itse tulla. Ja nainen sanoo, että ei kiitos. Heippa. No ei mitään, hän päättää niin kuin katsoa sitä elokuvaa. Ja hän soittaa hänen poikaystävälle, ja poikaystävä käskee, niin kuin, että soita poliisit. Mutta sitten ei kumminkaan niin kuin halua soittaa poliiseja jostain syystä, vaan hän nyt uskoo, että siellä ei ole sitten ketään. Ja sitten tämä nainen, joka tuli niin koputtaa oveen, niin se istui siellä ulkon niin jossain retkeilytuolissa ja poltti tupakkaa, niin kuin vaan odotti. Ja sitten kun tämä talonomistaja katsoi niin leffaa, niin se tuli kumminkin semmoinen olo, että hetkinen, että nyt on semmoinen olo, että joku niin katsoo mua. Sitten se rupesi niin katsoa silleen niin televisiotason alta ja takaa, ja teikö semmoisia niin aika pieniin paikkoihin. Sitten se käveli keittiöön, sitten se näkee, että siellä oli semmoinen niin kuin sormi silleen taitettuna. Siellä niin kuin jääkaapin ja seinän välissä, missä oli 20 sentin rako. Sitten se niin kuin jatkaa kattomista ja se näkee käsivarren. Ja sitten hän näkee siellä miehen, joka on ihan luonnottomassa asennossa. Siis ihan niin kuin, ja sitten niin kuin pää jotenkin ojennettuna, siis hyi. Ja tämä mies ei sano mitään, se vaan niin kuin tuijottaa häntä. Ja sitten nainen sanoo, että hei herra, sun pitää niin kuin poistua mun talosta. Ole hyvä ja poistu. Joten mies sanoo, tai kun ei vastaa mitään. Se vaan kyttää siinä. Sitten nainen on siellä, että okei. Hän avaa oven ja sanoo sille naiselle, joka siellä nyt vetää röökiä, että mä löysin sun miehen. What to do? Sitten tämä vaimo sanoo siihen, että nyt, että kun sä oot löytänyt sen, niin mä en tiedä mitä tapahtuu. Että nyt niin kuin ihan oikeasti, että nyt soitetaan ne poliisit, että mä en tiedä onko se vaarallinen tai jotain. Mutta niin kuin, että nyt me soitetaan poliisit. He soitti poliisit ja poliisit ei löydä tätä miestä sieltä talosta. He väittää, että siellä ei ole mitään. Ja sitten ne vaan sanoo, että jos ei sulla ole turvallinen olo, niin että sit sun niin pitää nukkua jossain muualla ja näin. Ja tämä poikaystävä siis kanssa tuli sitten töistä kotiin ja he ei sitten niin löytänyt sitä miestä enää. No sitten tämä miehen vaimo ja tämä talon omistaja vaihtaa puhelinnumeroita ja he päättää sitten niin alkaa, tai he rupesivat niin treffailemaan sitten vapaa-ajalla ja jutella tästä. Ja tämä nainen kertoi, että mies oli törmännyt tämmöiseen, että ollaan jostain kapeassa välissä tuijotellaan ihmisiä jostain netistä, koska siihen on siis joku ei Facebook, mutta joku tämmöinen nettiryhmä, missä miehet niinku harrastaa tätä. Ja se opettaa toisilleen, että miten voi niinku piiloutua tuijottelemaan ihmisiä. Mä en tiedä miksi, mikä tässä on tarkoitus. Mutta sitten he meni niinku kaupungille katsomaan, niinku, että miten tämä käytännössä niinku toimii. Ja parin tunnin aikana, kun he oli niinku ollut siellä kaupungilla, niin he oli kuulemma nähnyt 3 miestä tekemästä tätä. Ne oli seissyt jossain ihan luonnottomissa paikoissa, ihmeasennoissa, vaan tuijottomassa ihmisiä. Mikä tää juttu on?
Do you have a fear of clowns? Well, this story is probably the reason why. This is the terrifying true story of a killer clown. Or as many of you may know him better, John Wayne Gacy. One of the most infamous serial killers of all time. But let's start all the way back at the beginning. John Wayne Gacy was born in 1942 in Chicago, Illinois, as the only son in a family of 5. Because of this, his already abusive and alcoholic father was extra hard on him. His mother would try to defend John. That really only made it worse, causing his father to then call him a mama's boy, a queer, a sissy. Aside from that, though, he actually had a pretty good relationship with his mother and his 2 sisters. Well, that was until his mother had discovered he had stolen a pair of her underwear and hid it underneath the house. I mean, he was reprimanded for this, and he stopped doing it until he was 15, where he then went to some of his neighbors' clothesline and stole their underwear, hiding them in the same place. So already there were signs that he was not totally normal, but it didn't really come up again. I mean, he went on to live a pretty normal, perfect life, getting married to his first wife, Marilyn, having 2 children, opening a few businesses. He was involved in politics, all around a standout character in his community. Everyone loved John Wayne Gacy. And even his own father called and apologized to him, saying he was wrong about John the whole time. But of course, it was all a show. John was obsessed with teenage boys. At all of his businesses, he would only employ teenage boys, frequently asking them to come back to his house with the promise of alcohol and watching explicit movies. Well, this facade that John had created was all shattered in 1968 when a 15-year-old boy came forward to the police and said that John had SA'd him. John was then arrested to the shock of literally everyone around him. He tried to get out of this arrest and conviction in many ways, even hiring someone to go and beat up the victim to try to scare him into silence. But it didn't work. And then the victim came forward with these threats as well. So he was then sentenced to 10 years in prison. After all this, John's wife quickly divorces him and takes their children with her. But, and this is insane, John only ended up serving 18 months of his 10-year sentence. He was released on parole, and then not even 6 months later, he was accused of SAing another teenage boy. But the charges were dropped only because the victim never showed up to testify in court. But now that he was free from prison, John moved and started a brand new life, almost identical to his first one. He remarried, opened another business, became a standout pillar in the community, and restarted the lie all again. And I'm sure by now you can guess the only people he hired at this new business, teenage boys. John somehow became the master of a manipulative double life. It was around this time as well that he started volunteering his time as Pogo the Clown at children's hospitals, birthday parties, charity events, making the community fall in love with him even more. But knowing what we know now makes it just that much more sinister. And this is why he's given the nickname the Killer Clown. John Wayne Gacy took the life of his first victim, 16-year-old Timothy McCoy, in 1972. He lured Timothy back to his house while his wife was out of town. We don't know what the two did together that night, but John says that when he woke up in the morning, Timothy was standing in the bedroom with what looked like a sharp weapon. John then leaped up and grabbed it, using it to stab and kill Timothy. But what John found when he walked into the kitchen was chilling. Timothy had prepared them a big, lovely breakfast with a place setting for 2. He had no intention of ever hurting John. He simply went to go wake him up so that they could enjoy a nice breakfast together before he left. And then he was killed for it. John then hid the dead body in the crawl space of the house that he shared with his wife. After this, it was a domino effect. More and more young boys kept disappearing constantly, some even being employees of John. The police did question him multiple times, but being such a well-known and liked man, he was able to get out of it every single time. The police didn't even do a background check on him. Shortly after, in 1976, John divorced his second wife. With her out of the house, John Wayne Gacy began his killing spree. He lured all of his victims back to his house in the same way, offering them alcohol or drugs or explicit film. Like I said, John was very manipulative and persuasive. When they would arrive back at his house, John would trick them into handcuffs by saying it was one of his clown magic tricks, and then he would torture and SA them for hours before killing them, most commonly by strangling them with a rope. He was burying all these victims in his crawl space, under his floors, in his backyard, and when he ran out of space, even in a nearby river. Since a lot of these boys that were being reported missing didn't come from necessarily good families, police ignored them again and again, writing them off as runaways. That was until December of 1976, when 15-year-old Robert Peace told his mother that he was going to meet with John Wayne Gacy about a potential job opportunity and then never returned home. Since Robert was an outstanding student on the honor roll, came from a good family, it didn't make sense that he would just run away. So the police finally investigated his disappearance properly. In their investigation, they had multiple witnesses say that they had seen John and Robert together that night. This led to them being able to get a warrant to search John Wayne Gacy's house, where they didn't find Robert or any bodies, but they did find ropes, duct tape, handcuffs, the driver's licenses of other missing boys, and lots of other very suspicious things. So although they couldn't prove that he did it yet, he was very much on their radar. He was actually put on 24/7 watch. In fact, he became friendly with the police that were surveilling him. So one day he goes outside while they're sitting in their car. He invites them in for a cup of coffee. The police officers agree. And then when one goes to use the bathroom, he caught a smell of something coming up from the air vent underneath his feet. A smell that he knew was too specific to be anything else. It was the smell of death. The officer then runs out of the bathroom and tells John that he's going to get another warrant and that he will be coming back. At this point, John kind of knew that his time was up. I mean, he was literally sitting on a pile of bones. He then went to his lawyers and confessed to them that he had tortured, SA'd, and killed over 30 young men and boys. He was then arrested at the age of 36 and confessed to every detail. He even helped the police locate all the bodies. 29 were found in and around his house after the police literally had to tear it apart, and 4 others were found in the nearby rivers. All the victims that they could identify were between the ages of 14 and 21. Some of them, though, still have not been identified because their bones had fused together. Also, just another messed up piece of information. Every single one of these murders took place in the time that John should have been in jail for the first SA of that young boy. Obviously, he was found guilty of all 33 murders and was sentenced to the death penalty. He was then executed in May of 1994. If you didn't have a fear of clowns before, I'm sure you probably do now. Also, a piece of personal lore, his house is in the town where I grew up. I mean, obviously it wasn't in his time, but I lived like 5 minutes from him. Ugh. Let me know down below if there's any other stories that you want me to go over. I've actually been loving doing this so much. Okay guys, happy October, love ya.
What the fuck was that? Bro!
What's going on around you?
I don't know. I'm frozen. I am frozen.
Did the window
Sean.
break?
Let's talk about one of the first ghosts I ever saw. If you're new here, hi. I usually talk about some pretty scary stuff, and I think seeing ghosts kind of ranks pretty high. Just for some context, my brother attended a all-boys Catholic boarding school when he was in high school, and in my state where he went to school, it's in the middle of nowhere, and the building itself is so old that before it was a boarding school, it housed monks. And bear with me because I was like 5 or 6 years old, and I can't remember if we were moving him out of the dorms or into the dorms. But nonetheless, there were families there. My mom was there, my dad was there, my sister was there, kind of wandering around, and my brother and I were in his dorm room. And I say dorm room because at the time, I don't know about now, there were 2 massive oak French doors that opened into this massive room with a bunch of bunk beds that was their dorm. And I remember I was sitting on the bottom of a bunk bed when all of a sudden he grabbed my head and put it into his shoulder and said, "Don't look." And I had no idea what the hell he was talking about because I was like 5, 6. So I peeked over his shoulder. And what I saw is still ingrained in my head. It was a probably 6-foot man in a black cloak with a white face staring into the room. And it's important to note that he didn't have feet. And that's when I tucked my head in and we just kind of sat there for probably a couple minutes before my brother looked back and it was gone. And I never really understood what I saw until I was much older and my brother and I were talking and he said, yeah, the name of my school is very much haunted. Then he told me I'm not the first person to talk to him about this because his friends who also went to the school also saw similar things, like people walking into walls, people disappearing, footsteps in the middle of the night. And I always forget about that story, but from time to time it flashes in my head and I get chills every time. But that's going to do it for me. Stay tuned for more.